Hey, Devlin here. I'm about to take a walk down memory lane. Why don't you join me? Well, Remembrance Day is going to be here soon, and it's a very special day for me. It's kind of metamorphosis throughout the years, but it's a day that I always take off and I always do something. And I'm always thinking about my dad and my mom, too. My dad was a veteran of World War II. He fought two terms overseas. And my mother was a young girl who escaped East Germany prior to the war or during the war. I can't remember. I'm sorry about my ignorance. It's just my parents didn't really like talking about that stuff. Every once in a while you'd get a little bit of a story, but it was very private to them. Remembrance Day, I wish I could say, was always important to me, but when I was a kid, it wasn't. I knew my dad was a soldier and I knew my dad was fought in the war, but because he didn't talk about it, it never really touched me in any way. I just thought it was something he did. I'm embarrassed to say that when we were in school, we basically, were excited because we got a shortened day. They would have an assembly, and the part I liked about Remembrance Day the most was simply that we got off class early and we'd all go to the gym and then they'd show a movie about Remembrance Day. And even when I watched those movies, I knew they were important and I should pay more attention, but I did spend time giggling with friends and sometimes even thinking, is it over? Can we go home? My innocence, can be forgiven, but I feel bad when I think about that. It wasn't until I was in my teen years that I started realizing the importance of Remembrance Day, to actually remember the people who not only fought in previous wars, but the people who are still in service today. I decided it had to be important to me, and every time the 11 o'clock in the morning on November 11th happened, I would make sure that I would take some time. I would really concentrate, and I'd try to think of my dad and my mom going all through that and just all the lives that were lost so we could have freedom. Then it got even more to me. When I started watching war movies or watching documentaries about the war, it actually started realizing that my dad was about the same age of me. And here I was going to the movies and just having fun and going to school, where he was actually out fighting and risking his lives every day, losing people that he was fighting next to. So I really realized the importance of this day. As I got into my 20s and 30s, I decided that my dad never went to the memorial services that they always had, the veterans services. But I knew he watched them on TV, and I would decide that after about 5 minutes after 11 o'clock, I would call him and thank him for his service. And he always expected that call, and he always got it. And I started adding more to it. My family was never one for saying, I love you. I always take credit for saying that I kind of showed them how. I kept saying it to them, and eventually they started saying it back. I started in letters and cards that I would send them, and then I just started saying it because I felt it was something we needed to do. So when I'd call them, I'd basically tell them, thank you for your service, and I love you. Now, I still thought about my mom, but this was my dad and me's thing, and it went on for several years. Now, I told you he never went to the services, and one day I decided to be brave and say, I'm off work. Why don't we go downtown and go to the service? You don't have to wear your military outfits or anything. And he wasn't sure. But a couple of days later, he got back to me and said, yes, I'd like to do that. So we went. And I thought, well, maybe he'd go if he had someone standing next to him. And we had a wonderful time. It was cold, and it was just nice being there. And you could see a tear in his eye when he saw the old veterans that participated in this. and realizing that there were less and less every year. After we were done, I could tell it was an emotional toll for him, but he didn't want to go home right away. So he'd never go to a Legion, but he decided to take me to a bar. I was old enough now, and he took me to a bar so he could have a couple of beers. And, every once in a while you'd get a little story out of him, but not much. He would talk about it a little bit, but it took a lot to get out of him. And usually the stories he did tell me were either not appropriate or funny or just strange. When my father, we had a great time that day, and I don't regret ever doing that. A couple years later, he passed away. And we didn't go to any more memorials, and we didn't go hanging out in bars, but that day stood special to me. And when he passed away, Remembrance Day became harder for me because I had already lost my mom. So now, when I was thinking about all the veterans and stuff, I now would think of my parents who were no longer with me. So Remembrance Day became even more powerful for me. I'd go to the memorial services if I was off work, but most of the time I just worked through it and hoped and prayed that the work I was at would take the 11 minutes. When they didn't, I would usually find a way to do it. I'd sneak up on my own and take a minute or two to remember my dad, my mom, and all the other people in the services and that. A couple of years ago, once again, it metamorphosed, and I now spend it with a wonderful young man that is my son. He's not my blood, but we've kind of adopted each other as father and son. He's so much to me, my best friend, even more so. But I love the father-son aspect, and it really is there around Remembrance Day. We started going to the services together up at the Canadian Warplane Museum in Mount Hope, and it was always amazing. And yeah, we would start just hanging out. He loved the military, and he spent time in the military. When he was young, he did a short service there. Then he left it, went back again, and that lasted a little while. But he still has the heart of a soldier. And I told him my dad would have loved him because he was a young guy, but he is very old-fashioned in his ways, and he has the heart of the soldier. And so this day has become even more special because we always try to spend it together. This year, there's probably not going to be any memorials. There's not going to be any of that. But we still booked the day off, and we are still going to spend it together. We haven't figured out exactly what we're going to do, but that's between us anyhow. We might, go to my parents' grave. They have a memorial area where there were lots of soldiers that, basically they don't know their names, so they put them up for tribute. Kind of the unknown soldier type thing. Or we might just stay and watch some old horror movies. But the important thing is we're together. And I'm glad I got to the point where this day is special to me. When I see people wear a poppy, I get warm inside. Whether it was an older person who was affected by it or a younger person who may only know it through documentaries or hearing about it. It just makes my heart warm that we remember these people. And I will never forget my dad on any day. But that day is very special. And I'm glad it continues to be special for me and my son too. I hope you find your way of celebrating it this year too. Even if it's just wearing a poppy or showing some pride. That's all you need to do. Take that few minutes at 11 and remember not only the people who fought for our freedom and lost their lives, but the survivors and the families that lost as well. But the people who are still in service. Remembrance Day needs to be always a part of us. It will always be a part of me.